Join me, I am your host Dreadwing. Dive into the world of magic and explore the most stories full of wonder, fantastical delights. The lights.
Chapter 40. The Tibers. Yelena watched as Hanji inspected the controls for one of the Malian ships. Her hand grazed the buttons and dials before reaching a set of communication headphones. She picked it up and placed it on her head. "So this allows for communications, correct?" she asked. "Communications from one ship to the next," Yelena clarified. "It needs to be on the ship in order to maintain a stable connection." "So an obsolete version of what Optimus and Buckethead can do," Hanji assumed. "Buckethead?" Yelena questioned. "We call Matthew Buckethead because his head looks like a bucket," Hanji shrugged as she took off the headphones. "But what do you mean obsolete?" Yelena questioned. "Optimus and Buckethead have the ability to maintain wireless communication through something called a link. It's built into their heads and they can communicate for long distances. It's how we're able to gain information from Mali and the rest of the outside world so fast," Hanji explained. "They've used this during their civil war." Yelena didn't say anything as Hanji began to inspect the radio the headphones were connected to. "Is there a chance that we can take this out and see if this works?" Hanji asked. "We could probably make this wireless with Optimus's help." Hanji continued to mumble to herself, something about Optimus's lack of knowledge in technology and Buckethead having to stay in Mali. Yelena coughed aloud to get her attention, and Hanji turned her head to her. "Sorry," Hanji apologized. "We are grateful for what you brought us." "We are happy to be of assistance," Yelena smiled. "We do hope to see Eren Jija soon. Hopefully to talk about him meeting with Zeke to determine how to access the powers of the founding Titan." "Well, Eren does have a busy schedule," Hanji reasoned, "and we only just met you. Trust must be earned first." "Understandable," Yelena agreed. "Can you show me more of the ship?" Hanji asked with excitement. "Of course," Yelena answered. Hanji followed Yelena out of the control room, while Yelena quietly sighed to herself. This was going to be a lot harder on her than she thought. Mali. Megatron watched as Gabi and Falco were fighting against one another with rifles in their hands, incorporating the techniques that he taught them. He didn't teach them how to completely perfect the move, so he could see them struggling and determine weak points if he ever had to actually fight them in battle. "Matthew, when will I fight?" Zofia asked him. "You'll fight the winner," Megatron told her. As they continued fighting, Megatron noticed something out of the corner of his eye. He turned to see a Calvi walking alongside Willy Tiber with two personal guards at his side. Megatron wanted to duck his head and look away, but Willy noticed him and smiled with delight. "Matthew." Willy smiled as he walked up to him, ignoring the concerned looks of the guards. Megatron took a step back from the Tiber as he almost hugged him. Willy recognized Megatron's discomfort and quickly backed off. "Sorry," Willy apologized, "I forgot you don't like physical contact." Gabi and Falco stopped fighting, and the three children watched the conversation in shock. "Sir Tiber, Matthew is busy," Calvi informed as he gave Megatron a look of warning, "and we have some important business to discuss." "Give me 5 minutes," Willy requested. Calvi sighed, knowing he couldn't defy the Tibers if he wanted to. He glanced at Megatron before making his way back into the compound. "Matthew, how have you been?" Willy asked. "Oh, I don't know," Megatron mocked. "I'm still a prisoner, and have been one for almost 6 months." Willy winced while the three Eldians grew horrified. "Sorry," Willy apologized, "things have been complicated on my end. I have to maintain positive relationships with other countries to prevent another war, and Calvi wanted to talk to me about Titan experimentation." This could be useful, Megatron thought. Suppose that he was grateful that he made contact with him. Reading the book on this world's history allowed him to determine the importance of the Tiber family. His ancestors turned on his own Titan brethren in order to help the Malians defeat the other Titans. Because of this, he's been exalted as a hero. He still had to try to gain his favor to discover more of his secrets. I know that your freedom has not been at the top of my list, Willie sighed, before an idea came to his head, but you could come over to my home to discuss it. What? Megatron demanded. My schedule is free for tonight, Willie explained. You could come over, and we can discuss ways to get your freedom back. I don't think Calvi is going to let me leave the compound, Megatron informed as he pointed to the commander. Willie turned to Calvi and pointed at Megatron. May I borrow him for the night? Calvi looked like he wanted to say no, but debated his options and relented. He's to be back here by tomorrow morning. Perfect. Willie smiled as he turned to Megatron. I'll send you a car, and dash. I'll walk, Megatron interrupted, catching Willie by surprise. Are you sure? Willie asked. It might take some time. It's faster by car. It's fine, Megatron said. Well, if you insist, Willie relented. I'll see you tonight. Willie waved goodbye and walked back to Calvi and his soldiers. Megatron watched them leave before taking notice that the three children had their eyes glued to him. What? Megatron demanded. You're friends with the Tiber family? They all shouted. No, Megatron immediately shut down. We are acquaintances at best. He owes me a life debt. How did you meet him? Garby exclaimed. Back to training, now exclamation point close quote, Megatron shouted at them. Paradis. Optimus began tracking the northern regions of the island for any Energon deposits. He was at it for a couple of hours, but it yielded no results at the moment. There was no guarantee that the island would have more Energon deposits because of its small area. There would probably be more on the mainland, but there was no way that they could investigate it undetected. It would be hard for Marley to stumble across an Energon deposit, but he wasn't sure if he should rule that out as a possibility. Optimus sighed to himself. Perhaps it was best to return to base for the time being. Optimus transformed into his alt mode and drove south. Meanwhile, Yelena and Anyankapan were finally in casual attire. A white shirt with black pants and a jacket. The other restorationists were dressed the same way as a means for the Survey Corps to identify them better. Anyankapan had the plans for the port in hand as the two made their way to the tent Hanji and Levi were in. When they entered, Hanji was going over some plans for weapons, while Levi patiently watched her work. Hanji noticed Yelena and Anyankapan and rolled up her plans before grabbing something on the table. Yelena didn't notice until she grabbed it. I hope your stay is inviting, Hanji remarked. It's quite pleasant, Yelena smiled. We do have some plans we think might be useful to you, Anyankapan began as he showed the rolled up plans. The plans should be for later, Hanji reasoned. We just need to make sure everything is secure. We already have everything secure, Yelena retorted. The Marlians are your prisoners and you have their ships. That is true, Hanji agreed. However, what's to say that when the next Marlian fleet arrives, you wouldn't double-cross us? That you wouldn't release the Marlians we have in custody and hand Iran over to the enemy? That seems a little far-fetched, Yelena admitted. Maybe, Hanji shrugged, but it's not the craziest thing to happen to us. Yelena's mouth formed a thin line. Prove to us that you can be trusted, Hanji proclaimed. You seem to have no issue with trusting a being from beyond the stars, Yelena retorted. Anyankapan tensed as Levi glared at Yelena while Hanji cracked an unnerving smile. Trust me, Hanji began. Optimus has proven he's trustworthy. If he wasn't, he would have shot your ship when it was 50 miles out and let you drown. Anyankapan was shocked while Yelena felt a sense of dread go through her. They were spotted from that far away. Optimus entered the tent in his holoform and noticed the tension between the two women. Is everything all right? Hanji saw Optimus and her face lit up with relief. You're back. Any luck? I wasn't able to find Energon in the northern region, Optimus explained. Hanji groaned as Optimus turned to Yelena and Anyankapan. Optimus nodded his head to Yelena before turning his attention to Anyankapan. I do not believe we formally met, Optimus noted. Oh, I'm Anyankapan, he introduced himself. My name is Optimus Prime, Optimus said as he held out his hand towards him. Anyankapan was surprised, but shook his hand regardless. If you require my assistance, I will be training Iran, Optimus informed Hanji. Wait, Optimus. Take a break dash. Optimus's holoform dispersed into sparks, shocking Yelena and Anyankapan. Hanji threw her hands in the air. And he's gone. Prime is going to run himself ragged again, Levi said. Yeah, I fucking know. Hanji hissed. Wait, I thought he was invincible. Anyankapan questioned. Is that what everyone thinks? Hanji asked. Yelena ignored the conversation as she thought over what Optimus had said. The Titan trains Iran. He has direct connection to Iran. If Yelena wanted to get to him, she had to get through the Titan himself. Mali. Tiber residence. Megatron couldn't believe this. He couldn't believe this pathetic nonsense, yet here he was, standing in front of the gated residence of the Tiber household in the night. It was large and lavish, and he just wanted to burn it to the ground. Megatron looked through the gates to see no one on the front lawn. He then looked up to see two guards training their rifles on him. "State your purpose," one of them ordered. "Willie invited me here." Megatron shouted at them in his other vernacular. "Like we'll believe that bullshit," another one said. "Fine, I'll leave." Megatron told them, "Tell him I came by. I'll enjoy finding out about the reaction soon enough." Megatron turned to leave, but he heard the gates open behind him. Megatron turned back to see three people coming up to him. Two of them were guards, but the one in the middle was a woman. She wore a black dress with a white apron on top. Her hair was tied into a bun, and she stared at him with her brown eyes. "Matthew Hayes," the woman spoke. Matthew looked her up and down before raising an eyebrow. "I'm pretty sure I've seen you before. I was on the train next to my brother when you saved my nephew," she explained as she grabbed her dress and curtsied. "My name is Lara Tiber. Welcome to the Tiber household." She stood up to look him in the eye. "Come. Willie is expecting you." Megatron wanted to complain, but he forced himself to swallow his pride as he stepped into the compound, following the two soldiers protecting Lara. Megatron looked at his surrounding as he continued to follow. The grounds were green and lavish. By human standards, it was well taken care of. The former warlord noted that there were about 8 guards on the front lawn. At least from what he could see. An unknown person entered the compound, who knows how many more were present. He would have had to do a thorough sweep of the place to identify them all. When he entered the palace, he found more guards spaced out and standing as still as stone as the 4 of them passed by. Megatron looked up at them and saw that their eyes stared straight ahead. Oh, he wanted to break them. Lara knocked on 2 large doors and patiently waited. The doors were opened, and Megatron saw Willie sitting at his desk, going over some paperwork. Willie looked up and smiled at the Titan. "Matthew, you made it." Willie smiled as he got up from his chair. "I wasn't able to say no," Megatron admitted. Calvi actually confronted him earlier that day and ordered him to go to the Tiber household. If not, he would do everything in his power to find every loophole to force him to stay. By the pits, he just wanted them dead. "This is going to be a private matter," Willie told the guards and his sister. They nodded their heads and closed the door to the room. Megatron could still see their shadows under the door, indicating that they were close by. "I hope this is going to be productive," Megatron remarked as Willie was rummaging through some cabinets. He pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses and placed it on the table. "Would you like some?" Willie asked. "Not really, no," Megatron replied. "Are you sure?" Willie insisted. "It's a good brand." "I can't get drunk," Megatron admitted. Willie blinked before laughing in disbelief. When Megatron kept his serious expression, Willie stopped laughing. "You're serious?" Willie questioned. "You can't get drunk, how is that even possible?" "It's a blessing and a curse," Megatron proclaimed. "Because of my lifestyle, I've built up a ridiculous immunity to it. I can drink as much as I want, but I can't get drunk. At this point, it's something that I despise." "I feel sorry for you," Willie said as he poured himself some whiskey. Megatron gaze turned to the papers on the table. In reality, Megatron found a little trick by disabling the portion of his systems that allowed him to get drunk. It was meant for protection at the time. The last thing he wanted was to be terminated because he was unable to properly defend himself. "You do seem busy," Megatron noted as he tried to read the papers. "Well, being the head of the Tiber household does have its ups and downs," Willie admitted, "keeping up appearances and relations, especially during a time of war. The ambassador of the Middle Eastern nations has refused to talk to me. We are good friends, but his country comes first." Megatron nearly scowled as Willie gathered up his papers and stacked them into a neat pile before taking a drink. "So, is there a chance that you can guarantee me my freedom?" Willie sighed as he put the glass down. "Calvi wants you to remain within the ranks." Megatron's eye twitched in response. "What? It's not that I can't take you out, it would be a long process. But unfortunately, Calvi sees use with you. He's a stubborn man." If I try to react, he will most likely do everything in his power to counteract, Willie explained. It will take time, but if I can't free you before the war ends, maybe I can guarantee no one is able to touch you again. Megatron rubbed his temple in irritation. It was good that this would take longer than he anticipated. It would allow him to gather more information. The issue was managing with all of those humans for a certain amount of time. Is there a way that I can speed things along? Megatron asked. Maybe follow their rules, Willie recommended, please the commanders. I am not going to suck up to them, Megatron thought. He wouldn't let his pride allow it. Besides, he already threatened death on Calvi for threatening to keep him there longer than the agreement. Well, this was a waste of my time, Megatron stated as he turned towards the door. If you have anything useful, you know where to find me. Wait, Matthew. Willie called out as he stood up and got in front of Megatron. I would very much like to get to know you. That's not what I'm here for, Megatron retorted as he moved around him. Please, Willie pleaded, 30 minutes, at least. Megatron thought it over. Would the holoform even last that long? He did have it on since the morning, so at least 12 hours have passed. And maybe staying here longer would allow him to learn who has the Warhammer Titan. Megatron sighed, as long as he didn't offer him any food. 30 minutes, only, Megatron told him. Willie smiled as he beckoned Megatron to follow him. Megatron saw Willie pull out another chair for him to sit in. Megatron grumbled to himself as he sat down. This was going to be a long 30 minutes. 30 minutes later. Illegal death matches? Willie questioned in shock. Yes, Megatron responded, that's how I learned to fight so well. The conversation felt like it went on for so long. Megatron lost track about half of what they were talking about, the former warlord lying about some of that information. One question led to another, and the Tiber asked about his fighting style and how he learned it. So were you taught by someone in these death matches? Willie asked. No, I had to teach myself, Megatron answered truthfully. He couldn't really lie about his time in the gladiator arena. How did you escape? Willie asked. Did anyone know you were even there? I escaped through what was essentially a riot, Megatron answered, and no one really knew I was there. I'm essentially a nameless orphan. No mother or father? Willie asked in disbelief. My first memory was darkness, Megatron replied in a bitter tone, the darkness, dirt, and grime of the mines in Tarn. I'm sorry for asking such a sensitive question, Willie apologized. I'm assuming then you must be jealous of me. Megatron raised an eyebrow at that. I'm someone who was born into wealth and fame, Willie explained. I'm someone who was adored by everyone and heralded as a savior, but you, it didn't even sound like you were given a proper name. Megatron stared down in response. I'm not jealous of you. Willie seemed to sigh with relief. I'm angry with you, Megatron corrected. Willie tensed as Megatron glared at him. I've spent nearly every second of my life fighting to survive, and fighting for my freedom, Megatron explained. Meanwhile, you have lived a life of luxury and satisfaction. You don't know what it's like to struggle, feel pain, feel fear. You feel guilty about it too, like you can't do anything when you have all that money and power at your fingertips. Instead you keep it to yourself while others struggle to keep their bellies full. Megatron stood up. But the thing I hate most about you is that you will never know war. While you live a life of luxury for something you didn't even do, your Eldian brethren suffer. Forced to live through shame and humiliation and die for a country that would leave them to die if it suited them. You make me sick to my stomach, you hypocrite. That is rich, Unicron spoke from behind a stunned Willie, coming from someone like you. Megatron ignored Unicron and kept his attention on Willie. He blinked in surprise when Willie began chuckling. So you are an Eldian sympathizer, Willie remarked. No, Megatron declared, all of humanity, Eldia and Marley, is nothing more than pathetic parasites. Yet you still saved the life of a rich, pathetic Eldian, Willie retorted, meaning that part of you still cares about humanity. Willie smiled sadly as he looked down. Even if I don't deserve it. Megatron watched Willie regain his composure and stand up. Sorry to end on such a somber note, but I would very much like to meet with you again. I just insulted you, Megatron reminded. Why would you want to meet with me again? I think it's because you see me as nothing more than a pathetic human, Willie answered. No more. No less. Later. Megatron was escorted off the premises by the two guards. Megatron turned to leave, but he felt a hand on his shoulder. He glanced over to see Lara removing her hand from his shoulder. What do you want? Megatron demanded. I already met with your brother. Lara handed him a roll of cash, causing Megatron to fully face her. I don't need your money, Megatron proclaimed. If this is a bribery, then that shit's not going to work. This is my thanks to you, Lara insisted. You saved my family that day, while I was unable to do a thing. You've done a great service by protecting the Tibers, and you have given me relief to know that my nephew is safe. Megatron pushed the hand of cash away from him. I don't need it. Please, Lara pleaded. No, Megatron shut down. I'll see you around. Megatron walked away from the Tiber residence. After walking for some time, he hid in an alley before deactivating the holoform. Zeke wanted to close his eyes. He wanted to close his eyes and fall asleep, but he couldn't. He was sitting with the other officers as they were heading back to Liberio. The battle was a success, but the struggle to seize control of the battlefield was noticeable. There were only 3 Titans in use for the war, and the other 2 were currently being experimented on. He assumed that the Middle Eastern nations believed the 2 Titans were lost to Paradis, which wasn't that far-fetched. But he wasn't sure if they were aware about the origins of Optimus Prime and Matthew. He felt like if they were, their advancement of technology would become even more desperate. He just hoped that Matthew didn't cause that much trouble. Morning in Mali. Megatron walked through the streets of Liberio in the morning. He never took the time to try to map out the entirety of this city in the event something bad happened, so he figured that he could try to memorize it. He saw many humans walking in the same and opposite direction, many of whom looked at him with fear and disgust. He saw dirty humans holding large brushes. He saw vendors opening up shop and advertising products and food. Humans were opening up the windows of their apartments to dry their sheets and welcome the new day. Some humans were sitting and talking with one another while eating breakfast. He noticed a homeless man begging for money, but the other humans ignored him. Some pulled their sparklings away from the man. This place was surprisingly full of life. It was active and flourishing, and yet he felt so alone. He was a stranger amongst a race he despised. If he so much as deactivated the holoform, chaos would reign. He wasn't human. He was Cybertronian. He couldn't discuss anything with anyone. His thoughts, his feelings, his truth. And even if he did, they would cower in fear and call him a monster. Some already see him as one right now. Megatron found himself walking alongside an open field all alone. The grass was green and the ground was wet. He saw a primitive aircraft in a large warehouse, ready to be removed and prepared for lift-off. These humans kept on chasing the riches of this world and beyond, yet he already knew everything about it. But he couldn't share it. Not with anyone. Megatron continued walking along. He had no true, honest companionship. He knew he didn't deserve it, but the thought was beginning to weigh on him. I think it's because you see me as nothing more than a pathetic human. He saw Willy as a pathetic human because that's what he was, but he could tell that Willy was happy to hear those words. Willy believed Megatron's actions were one of genuine kindness, and not as a means to an end. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that Megatron despised all of humanity, and saw them as nothing more than a weak species. He couldn't say the truth, and for some reason it bothered him. Calvi waited by the gate for his army to return. They were scheduled to come back today, and he was pleased to know that the battle was a success, although there was some trouble along the way. It was frustrating to say the least. They had to ensure that the experimentations were a success before sending the female and colossal titan into battle. However, the state of the colossal titan has worsened. He was starting to question whether or not a transfer was the best option. Calvi blinked in confusion and disbelief as Matthew came walking back into the compound. He still looked irritated and tired, and when his eyes fell on him, the man nearly sneered in disgust. Talk to me later, Matthew hissed as he passed him. He came back, Calvi thought. Matthew could have escaped after meeting with the Tibers. He could have left, and no one would have been able to stop him. But he still came back. Was it because it was the easier option? Was it because it was more inconvenient if he did leave and he was hunted down? Whatever the reason, maybe he did want to gain his trust. Suppose he'll talk to Matthew about the day-off situation. Paradis. Yelena rubbed her fingers on her knuckles as Nyankapan sat down to drink some tea. This will be harder than we anticipated, Yelena proclaimed. It's not like they were going to trust us off the bat, Nyankapan reasoned. But they should have been enticed with us, Yelena retorted. We have knowledge of the outside world. We've lived in it, but it seems that they don't care. But those titans ruined it all. They can't access the weapons and tools that they have, Anyankapan reminded. But they can get the knowledge and information from them, Yelena told him. Hanji was looking at the weapons I brought the first time around like it was second-hand knowledge, and she wasn't even invested in the wireless communication that we had. She said it was an obsolete method of Optimus and Matthew's form of communication. Because of those titans, technology means nothing to them right now. And Yankapan finished his tea. We can always use culture as a means to gain their trust. I doubt the food Optimus eats is edible, even if he eats it all. That's true, Yelena agreed, but those titans prevented the plan from running smoothly. And Yankapan noticed Yelena clenching her fists in anger. He knew Yelena hated the metal titans, specifically Optimus Prime. She just didn't show it. She was fascinated with them, but her anger with them most likely had to deal with Optimus physically attacking Zeke and nearly killing him. Her devotion to Zeke ran deep, and at times it worried him. She always seemed to put him on a pedestal. She practically worshipped him. Zeke was considered the strongest titan in play at the moment, but Optimus Prime and Matthew Hayes' existence practically destroyed Yelena's vision of Zeke. The strongest titan on this world, and it couldn't even come close to titans among the stars. We still have to be careful, Anyankapan reminded. Yelena sighed in irritation. I know. We must get to Iranjija. Marley. Zeke opened the door to his office and found Matthew on the couch reading a book. I thought I locked the door, Zeke remarked. Like a primitive lock is going to stop me, Matthew said in his regular voice. So, what happened while I was gone? Zeke asked. The Tiber invited me to his home to discuss my freedom, Matthew. Around, your commander wants me around because he sees an apparent use for me. He won't let me go that easily. Anything else? Zeke asked. Your followers successfully made it to the island, Matthew replied. Are they okay? Zeke asked. As long as they don't start killing anyone, Matthew responded. Megatron watched as Zeke walked over to his chair and sat down before falling over on his desk. Megatron raised an eyebrow and walked over to the desk. He saw that Zeke had fallen asleep, his chest rising and falling with slow ease. Megatron glared at him. How easy it would be to end him. He couldn't be trusted. Something in the back of his mind was telling him to end his life. He wants to save Eldia. He doubted that. If he sold out his own parents to save his life, then he had no doubt he would be willing to betray his own comrades if it suited his needs. Megatron chose to walk out the room and shut the door. Executing him was a dangerous thing to do at the moment. He just had to bide his time. He could be patient. Marley Science Lab. All he could hear were voices. All he could see was a ceiling through one eye and darkness through another. Or what he thought was darkness. It was dark shades of purple and black mixed together in one eye and a ceiling in another. He couldn't tell what was real or not. He knew that he couldn't feel his arm anymore. He didn't think that he could feel his leg or his side either. It was practically numb. Berthold blinked as he heard the door opened. Someone was coming in. He didn't know who. He didn't know where. He saw out of the corner of his eye that it was demonic. A demon. Someone was trying to kill him. He had to fight back. He didn't want to die. Meanwhile, the head scientist was going over a new sample of Berthold Hoover's blood, and suffice to say, it was terrifying. There was no Eldian blood. It was dark purple, it was all corrupted. There weren't even active cells. It was all just dead. The head scientist jolted as he heard a loud scream down the hall. He put the sample away and bolted towards the source. The head scientist watched in horror as the Eldian was beating another scientist to death. He nearly shit his pants as he saw the Eldian growling like an animal and yelling in aggression. There were purple veins everywhere, including the charred side of his body, and the eye on the charred side was glowing a dark purple. He screamed as he slammed another scientist into the wall before beating his face into the ground. Restrain. The head scientist shouted in fear, restrain him now. How? Another shouted. Berthold turned and saw more people in his vision, but it was continuing to distort as he saw monsters instead of people. He tackled another one of these monsters to the ground and beat him mercilessly. He was about to go after another, but he felt a strong pain through his lower abdomen. He looked down to see a bullet wound through his stomach. He slowly turned and his vision cleared to see Commander Magarth pointing a pistol at him. He had a strong look of disgust and fear within his eyes. Berthold tried to reach out for him, but Magarth shot him in the eye that was completely purple. Berthold collapsed on the ground, and blood seeped from his wounds. The scientists expected a fast regeneration, but the process was such a slow amount of time. We need to close the wound, Magarth ordered. Save the colossal titan. Now. We have to take precautions. Then take it, Magarth ordered. The colossal titan's survival matters more. The scientists began to scramble to get their gear and save Berthold. Magarth let the gun slip from his hand and clatter on the ground. Blood was coming from Berthold's mouth as the purple veins receded. What the hell? What the hell?
I'm glad you enjoyed that video / gameplay. Just remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, goodbye!